Yeah, it's not anywhere close to that. But yeah, drive in, you know, rough plumbing, electric, and last week.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Katrina Harms, chair of the DEA. We're excited to have Joe Minicozy here to present. Catherine's going to introduce him. I just want to explain for people who haven't been here before. This has been put out as a work session so that we can follow sunshine laws because we have all of our trustees and things here. So the presentation, you're welcome to watch the presentation and listen to any questions. You can definitely catch up with me afterwards or with any of the board of trustees or your usual stuff. But we don't do the public comment during work sessions, but I think you'll find the presentation to be great. So, Catherine Corral from DC.
Hi. Thank you, Katrina. And thank you all for coming out and for having us back to Nederland. I'm with a group called Downtown Colorado, Inc. We work all over Colorado with communities around vibrant commercial districts. So thinking about those places where you gather as a community and how to make them the most vibrant and meaningful and hold on to the character and really thinking about your community and the shared space within it. We have had Joe Minicozy at our conference the last couple years, and we have been promoting him to different communities around the state of Colorado because as we are working through this state, what I see is a lot of decision-making bodies that are very challenged by how do we balance the character of our community with the need for economic vitality. So the choice between character and growth is something that many communities are facing. And in Colorado, where we have such extreme pressures around development and growth, it's important to think very strategically about how you use your land and how you make decisions about your land use. So I have seen Joe present several times, and I really think that the way he looks at land use and the economics of land use is something very meaningful. And so we've been trying to bring this to different regions of our state over the past 2 years. So how many presentations? I don't even know how many you've done. But I'm really excited to have him here because I think, you know, Boulder County and Nederland, you all have some pressures that may not exist anywhere else. So I hope that you will enjoy this presentation. It is definitely food for thought, a good way to consider what you're choosing to do in the future. And if nothing else, it will continue to spark conversation amongst all of you. So, Joe, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Is the mic on? Yeah, check. Can you hear me? Oh, cool. I'm going to cover a lot of different issues. I'm probably going to approach this a little differently than I typically do, mostly because of how small your town is and the issues that you're dealing with. But really when I talk to people about cities, I try to find a way to make common ground about what you're dealing with as a community as you grow. Catherine and we met like 3 years ago. A lot of what I see in Colorado is a lot of what I see around the country, but it is different here. But what I try to do is come up with a way of talking about things in a common language. And usually I ask the audience, and I'll ask you all this. Can we get the lights in here? I think the screen is more entertaining than I am, so I want you all to see the screen. But I started a presentation at the National Smart Growth Conference in 2009. And I asked the audience, and I'll ask you all, show of hands, who in this room has read your local property tax assessment policies? Oh, that's actually pretty good. Usually like one hand goes up. Are y'all assessors or something? You're in real estate. So, you know, here you are at a smart growth conference. We want to do smart growth policies, yet we don't understand how taxation works at a basic level. Most people don't, I should say. Y'all are maybe a little bit higher density than most people. So we don't understand how real estate's being priced. We don't understand that actually a lot of our tax policies run counter to what we want to see with smart growth and all of that. So if you don't know that, if you don't understand that, I'll make it real simple. If you're taxing on value, there's a perverse incentive for building junk in your community. It's that simple. So there's an incentive for me as a developer to build something of low value, because I'm going to be paying lower property taxes with that lower value real estate. And this is something that we just try to get across. And I love this quote from Mark Twain: "A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can." So for those of you that haven't read your tax policies, I'm an architect. I like looking at pictures. I don't like reading tax policy. But I did it, and I suffered through it. The second thing is I want you all to put yourself in a place and time. This is a city that's in a town, really, it's a village, more like it, that's in a place and time. And you will grow or you will die. You're on a trajectory path. You just didn't, this that's out here just didn't happen overnight. It happened over close to 100 years, or more than 100 years actually. But if you want to see me and how I started my life, this is me when I was 3 months old. This is my trajectory, right? So I didn't be my grandfather, whether I like it or not. There's not a lot I can change to be Papa. Or more importantly, I look at this guy, my father. So I'm genetically Italian. You can see that by how much I'll use my hands when I talk. You can see that from my name. But we also have genetic predisposition to heart disease. So I know that I have to deal with that. Every Minicozy male in our family has had to deal with it. So it's no surprise to me that I have to watch what I eat, I have to exercise, I have to lower my stress level, right? You won't do this. When you look at your family members, you see these things inside you. So the big challenge for you all is, how do you find a grandparent? What town do you want to be when you grow up? Which direction are you going? Good and bad. What are the things that you can learn? And I think with Catherine's group is an incredible resource that your state has, that I don't think there's a pure example in the whole entire United States, that you have somebody that has access to all of these tools. And that's one of the things that I see that you all do, is just bring other examples to folks of other family members inside Colorado to learn from them. So this is the challenge. I'm putting all my challenges up front, by the way. I want you all to think about this. Where do you want to grow? Who are you looking at for good and bad examples? Some of you all have seen me present before. For those of you that have seen this, no shouting out the answers, but for everybody else, I want to give you a quick little test. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. So it's really easy. It's just a children's puzzle. Tell me how many shapes you see. Ready? Go. Okay. Shout out the answers. 5.
17.
17. 2 17s. Anybody want to go higher than 17?
Oh, come on. I could.
I would. I have no idea, but I know there were lots of shapes.
Okay. Really drilling down. We got an overachiever in the audience. All right. How many kids were on the school bus? What time was it on the clock?
Oh, wow.
So what I just did to you is a behavioral trick. There's a Nobel Prize-winning behavioral psychologist. His name is Daniel Kahneman. Wrote a book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he's gone through and figured out different behavioral quirks that we have that are survival mechanisms. One of which I just did to you, which is I've asked you a question. And you immediately went to look for the answer. You didn't see the 5 kids on the bus. You didn't see there was 10 after 10 on 1 on the clock. Because I didn't ask you that question. You know, so this struggle of looking for where you're going, you have to be careful of the questions that you ask yourself as well. You know, just, are you gathering all the data? Do you have an understanding for everything that's out there? Are we asking the right questions about our village or town, about where you want to go in the future? And so oftentimes we end up having these arguments about what's sitting there right in front of us without seeing the context of how this all fits into a future plan. So that's just, I wouldn't recommend reading Thinking Fast and Slow unless you have a lot of time on your hands. There are other books like Predictably Irrational that are really good. And there's a new trend inside behavioral psychology that's getting into this stuff with economics and how we behave. We're hairless apes, right? So there's ways that we behave. So the question before you is what is a city? What is a town? This is my town. That's Asheville. Who's been to Asheville, by the way? Okay, cool. Thanks for drinking our beer. You probably had our beer. We have like 50 breweries in town now. It's kind of crazy. Asheville is up in the mountains. We're in the western part of the state. Beautiful setting. We're mountain people. Blue Ridge Parkway comes through town, Smoky Mountains, bluegrass music, beer. We've got 50 breweries, and like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place, right? This is how Asheville started in the 1800s. This is a shot down Main Street. 15 years after this picture was taken, this is the same exact location. We like to say the three T's made Asheville, but once the train lines came there, it brought a flood of tourism and people escaping the polluted cities for our tuberculosis clinics. Second streetcar line in the entire country. Presidents came to visit. We've had Obama 3 times in Asheville. During the 1920s, we were growing at 20% in population every single year of the decade, which is explosive growth. A lot of people don't realize this. We were the second largest city in North Carolina by 1930. The only city that was bigger than us was Winston-Salem. We achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. We were #1 in debt. And when the Depression hit, we thought we had $5 million in the bank. It turned out we had $18,000 in the bank. A little clerical error there. Our whole entire city council was indicted and the mayor committed suicide. That's how we entered the Depression.
Wow. Excellent.
Isn't that awesome? By the way, this building was built in 1927. This woman who built this building, she knew something in dirt about this guy's father, so she got him to build the elevator shaft so that she could get to her building. So this is one of the only buildings in the United States that actually has vertical circulation on somebody else's property. But anyway, that's Asheville for you. But Thomas Wolfe, famous American author, wrote the book Look Homeward Angel. He was a native of Asheville. This is what he said about his hometown. Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city, and in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. That's a hell of a thing to say about your family or your hometown, right? Now, incidentally, I don't know if anybody's ever lived in the South in here, but you generally don't say stuff like this in public. You certainly don't write it in a book. He was threatened, his family was threatened. His second book was called You Can't Go Home Again, for obvious reasons. So if you ever heard that term, that's where it comes from. But in a way, it's not that he was clairvoyant, he was kind of right. This would have damage to our community for generations. It would take us until 1976 to pay off the debt. So what's crazy about this, you'd think that they'd be proud of paying off $56 million of debt that we've been shackled with for 40 years, but it's the third headline in the story behind something about abortions and somebody dying in a prison fire. This isn't even our county, by the way. This is like, imagine somebody dying in a prison fire over in like Fort Collins, and you put it in your newspaper. We can tell it's a big deal because, we get Miss Asheville with her tiara, get these 3 guys to burn the last bond. They teleprompter in Billy Graham, so it's a big deal if Billy shows up. And when we did that, when we got out of our debt burden, we started trying to catch up to other cities. So we cut a highway through the north side of downtown, which became the Crosstown Expressway. And the coup de grace was when we blew the mountain open and made Bowcatcher Cut. This is the Bowcatcher Mountain. It was interesting that the community actually fought the cut and wanted to have a tunnel, but DOT didn't have the technology to do a tunnel, even though some lost civilization of humanoids left us a tunnel right here. But whatever. On the other side of the cut, the mall happened and our downtown died. So these are shots from not too long ago. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity. And you just look at these wonderful fixer-upper opportunities here. Why don't you all come to Asheville and put some money into that? You could just blow a cannon off and not hit a pedestrian on the street. So basically the silver lining on all of that debt is we were too poor to tear anything down. We couldn't do urban renewal. We had a bad bond rating. So all of these buildings were just mothballed. But we had this culture of that won't work here. That's not who we are. We're rural mountain people. We tried that downtown thing once before, it didn't work. And so we have a resistant community to change in that. But there were people that did try to go against it. This is Julian Price. Julian Price moved to Asheville. He's a transplant. He spent some time in Seattle, but he's originally from Greensboro. Inherited a lot of money, moved to Asheville, and put his inheritance to work. Basically $15 million worth of inheritance he dumped into buildings. I used to work for his company, Public Interest Projects. 75% of his money goes into the sticks and bricks, fixing up and rehabbing buildings, getting people living downtown, basically. But we reserve 25% to seed businesses. So the first vegetarian restaurant right here, this is the Laughing Seed. They went to the bank, they tried to get a loan to do the restaurant, And the bank just took one look at their menu, and they're like, "Where's your pork? North Carolina's a pork state. Where's your pork?" And they're like, "We're vegetarians." And the bank's like, "That won't work." And we knew their food because they had a lunch counter at the YMCA, and they were awesome. So we basically bankrolled them. They bought us out, and now they're one of the anchor institutions in Asheville. Incidentally, Asheville is one of the top 10 vegetarian restaurant cities in the entire country right now. But all of that is about understanding your community and having faith in it. We also own a nightclub with live music. It's about having stuff for people to do in your community as well. So rather than invest in a recreation room inside our buildings, we put that recreation on the street as other people's businesses, as entrepreneurs. So this is one of our buildings before and after. This is Malaprop's bookstore. This won independent bookstore of the year in the year 2000. And the other thing that we had to deal with is this kind of changing of perception of what cities were. Julian had his own magazine back then. He passed away in 2001. But I love this. This is an article about people were just sticking up billboards all over the place. This is one of the buildings back then, just boarded up. And I love this quote: "Among cities with no particular recreation appeal, those that have preserved their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourism simply doesn't go to a city that's lost its soul." Now, it's not that we were huge tourism boosters. We weren't a member of the chamber or the tourism board. We just wanted the community to have a sense of pride in the place. 15 years after, and this is a quote from Arthur Frommer that he used, 15 years after he published this, Arthur Frommer's magazine would list us as the number 5 place in the country to visit. Just last year, we got listed number 1. Last year, we had 9 million tourists come through our town. We're a town of about 90,000 people. So it is a struggle to deal with that. But on the flip side, it gives us a lot of choice. I can't eat at all 75 restaurants downtown, but it's kind of awesome when I go down there and I want to eat something. I have 3 Indian restaurants and all that. So it's just, again, it's that stuff about supporting the lifeblood of my community, making my community interesting, but also capturing that value of tourism that's part of Asheville's culture. But we find ourselves constantly communicating inside our peer group of our citizens about what this means for us to do work in our downtown and how to do rehab. And I love this quote from Michael Bloomberg: "In God we trust, but for everyone else bring the data." Rather than have a conversation that's touchy-feely about stuff, can we actually find data points to find value in our community? So this is what's going on with our downtown. This is the value of our downtown, is a collection of real estate. So our downtown was worth about $100 million when it was all boarded up. And just by fixing up those upper stories in those buildings, this is what happened. So the value of our commodity of our downtown is a portfolio. We're a small portion of that. There are other developers that came in and other investors that all rehab buildings. So that value was just sitting there not used. Now to show you the conflict inside our community, this is this guy Chris Peterson. I love Chris, he's a riot. These are his campaign ads from the 90s. This poor taxpayer, he's just crying. He's like shackled by past council decisions for doing parking decks and streetscape projects. Now basically what the city realized is that the only way that they could get those buildings active is they had to centralize the parking. Otherwise we'd do it through zoning. We'd have, essentially force somebody to tear a building down to make surface parking, which is just dumb. So the city's like, why don't we just centralize it and make it work? Chris didn't like that, $26 million. Now, I don't have $26 million. Does anybody got $26 million in their pocket? No, that's a lot of money. But let's do the math here. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset, that uncorks $400 million, $440 million of value. Is investing $26 million and getting back $440 million, is that a good return on investment?
Yes.
Yeah. So in my community, I'm like, why do we listen to Chris? He's entitled to his opinion about stuff, but there's facts about what's really going on. Let's just look at this, and let's have an unemotional conversation about money for a second. This is what it means for our community as well. If we can now afford 5 times more sidewalks or whatever, right? So we talk to people that way in our community to get back to the essence of what cities are, that we're all in it together. This is straight out of Oxford Dictionary. It says incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So you all have a city charter or town charter. You're essentially created as a corporation. You have a board of directors that have to
manage it in trust for the community, right? So you have shareholders that hold you responsible. We have the same thing. It's like my mayor is the CEO of a $12.8 billion real estate development project called Asheville. That's the way that we look at it. So how does it function? The city is essentially a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. So in my case, there's only so many acres. Oh, by the way, my state made it illegal for us to annex anything, just my city. We have an awesome state going on. So there's a finite boundary of acres there, and they need to be managed, and we should be looking at them. So at $12.8 billion, my city, my mayor, is a CEO that's 6 times the value of Ted Turner. You know, it's like, does she think of herself that way? I think she should. Do you think that Ted Turner would just like throw random darts at things, or would he have a business plan and follow it and understand the economic return on things? So this is part of what we challenge our elected officials toward. Now, why we do that is because those products inside your community all have different values. This is one of our buildings that we rehabbed. We made ground story retail, second floor office, residential above. This is an old JCPenney's department store. The city did this streetscape project. So this is what Chris is upset about. We got a garbage can, a bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. So thank you, city, for this wonderful investment in front of us. It's a subsidy in Chris's world that we were subsidized and we didn't have to pay for that. True enough. We took this building from $300,000 of value to $11 million of value. So the taxes on that parcel of land shot up 3,500%. So that means we can afford 3,500% more garbage cans, bike racks, whatever you want. Do y'all have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? Wouldn't that be kind of awesome? So that's our community's wealth coming up together that we're helping with. It's taxes we're paying, right? And people say to me like, well, Joe, that's not fair. We've got this Walmart over here at $20 million worth of value. True. Now Walmart pays $220,000 in property taxes, which is huge. This is my house, those are my dogs. My dogs think they're lions. We're on 1/10 of an acre. We do that to freak our neighbors out, by the way. We're on 1/10 of an acre, so if a 1 acre cookie cutter fell from space and hit my neighborhood, it grabbed 10 houses with everybody paying $2,000 or about $20,000 an acre, right? You follow me there? So that, if a farmer grows a crop, the farmer's looking at that farm as an economic model and figuring out the water per acre, the fertilizer per acre, the crop yield per acre, and doing the math on what yields revenue in the community, right? They don't just go out or to their farm, they don't just go out and just till all the soil. So, okay, so if you had an acre of that crop, this is what you get. Now, take that acre and fly in space and divide Walmart by the 34 acres it sits on and divide its tax bill, this is what it's paying per acre. Now, if you had an acre of our building, this is what you get. So, I could just pose this question, this joke actually works here. If I had an acre of land, what are you going to grow in Colorado? You grow the cash crop, right? You know, it's just, y'all get it. So people say to me, like, well, Joe, that's fine. We take the losses in property taxes to take the gains in retail taxes. Let's go ahead and remove me because I don't sell anything. And again, let's look at the retail. So here's the property taxes that come back to the city. This is the wrong number to look at. The city just gets a portion of that, which is $47,500, which is more than the property taxes, but combined, this is the total take of retail plus property taxes. This is just our property taxes. We've got retail on the ground floor and in the basement, around the corner over here. So you add our retail taxes, now you're cooking with gas, jobs per acre. How do you want to look at this? It just makes economic sense when you look at this stuff side by side. We even have 90 units of residential per acre versus their 0. So we've been building this stuff this way in this pattern for tens of thousands of years because this is how we make economic sense as a group of people living together in a community. There's the wealth that's had when you grow this is this form of development. So that's just the city side. Because we don't have a great relationship with our county residents are constantly at war with us. They got the state to take our water system away. That was kind of awesome. One of our state legislators called us a cesspool of sin. It was kind of fun. I was on the board of directors for the Downtown Association, And we all had this little uncomfortable meeting. We're like, do you think Senator Forster really meant that? And so we like sent a reporter to go talk to him. And his second quote was, it's not that whole county. There's some good people in the county. It's just that downtown part where the freaks and weirdos are. That's the cesspool. So we threw a beer party in the streets. I mean, what can you do? It's like, hey, we make t-shirts that say welcome to the cesspool. But we like to show the county is that the average city resident produces more county taxes to the county per acre than somebody out in the county. So how about a thank you card every once in a while, rather than hate on us? Here's the mall, what the mall produces in county taxes to the county versus residential. So commercial is more productive than residential. But let's not stop there. Here's our building downtown at $250,000 an acre in county taxes versus the mall at $8,000. So what's good for the downtown core is great for the city, but it's unbelievable for the county because you're hemorrhaging all that property tax wealth out to the county. So the county should actually reinvest back in as well. And maintaining that conversation is critically important. So I just went through a lot of stuff to lay the framework of how we look at cities as a level of productivity. This isn't complex math that I'm doing. It's just simple 5th grade mathematics. We do this with cars, right? When we talk about cars, we don't talk about it on a miles per tank basis, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. Y'all would laugh at me. You're like, come on, Joe. The tanks are different sizes. It's the miles per gallon that counts. When we say miles per gallon, the numbers change, and we should all be driving a 1955 BMW Acetas. Sorry to you Prius owners, but 1955 technology is actually better. But it's a dangerous little car. If you have a head-on collision in this thing, you're stuck, unless you climb through the roof. Anyway, I'm being cute here with a joke, but we do this as productivity for cars. Use land as your commodity for your buildings, and look at your city that way. So we've done this all across the country. We've done it in Canada, New Zealand, big places, small places. Driggs, Idaho was the smallest place we did. And when you mash it up, all of the data, it's real simple. For every dollar of county taxes somebody out in the county is paying on single family to the county, a town or city resident's typically paying about 5 times that. The Walmart's about $7, the mall's about $9 per that $1. And as soon as you get to a 2-story building, and this could be in Driggs, Idaho or downtown Durham, as soon as you get to that 2nd story, that's when things pop up, 3rd story and 6th story. Now some people say to me, they're like, well, Joe, you just want to see a bunch of skyscrapers. And that's not true. The skyscrapers would indeed produce more wealth, but that would never happen here because you don't have the market to support it. On top of that, it'd become a little bit weird. But it's just, that's not what this is all about. This is all about understanding the cash flow of the system. So this is back to Chief Justice Brandeis. These are the relentless rules of humble arithmetic. If you just do the math on this stuff, it'd show you what's going on. So we use some high-tech stuff, GIS technology, which actually your county has access to all of this stuff as well. But we can map infrastructure, the roads and streets. On the roads and streets, the buildings are attached to that. And then you can map the ologies. We can map hydrology, geology. So we're used to doing this stuff. The technology exists to do this. And the only thing that's different about what we do is we separate nature and the man-made, and we map policy and economics, just so to see the visual picture of the cash flow of what's going on in your community. So back to Asheville for a second. This is my county. This is a big federal park right here, part of Mount Mitchell. So just to be crude about it, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that to 0. It's not taxable, it's not producing taxes, so I don't care about it. Now the reality of it is it's an incredible economic engine for our community. It's unbelievably beautiful, and it's the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi. But just from a taxable standpoint, it's not producing property taxes, so we're just go ahead and 0 it out. Then we have low value in green, hot is high value. So this is the Biltmore Estate, the Vanderbilt Mansion. When Bill Cecil, who's the heir to the Vanderbilt Mansion, when he shows up, his house is worth $100 million. And when he shows up at a council meeting, we all genuflect and thank him for his time. He's an incredibly valuable person. But it's kind of not a fair way of looking at it because he's got the biggest house in the entire country, and he's got 4,000 acres of land in his territory. So he's got the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre in the map changes. Now all of a sudden we can get a better sense of the economics of our community, but I'll just show it to you in 3D. Anybody want to take a guess where downtown Asheville might possibly be? So this is the cesspool. Yeah. So how about a box of chocolates or a thank you card for all this wealth that we're producing for you? Because if you throw a blanket of our county's millage rate across this model, where does the county get the majority of its money? Right here. Now, we can see that if this is the prime, this is the big city, this is our little sister over here called Black Mountain. This is 12,000 people. It's about 10 miles away. This is its main street. So if this is Mama Bear, this is Baby Bear. And there are some lessons that are translated between these two places. They function very similarly, just at different scales or in different time frames. So this is Grandma, and this is the 10-year-old. Another way of looking at it. There's a trajectory of how towns grow, and this is on its path. So that's our model. Smallest place, just to kind of, I talked with Catherine about this. What's the smallest place we grabbed? Teton County, Idaho. Anybody ever been there? It's on the backside of the Grand Tetons. Very sad what they're going through. They did this rampant, just about every development that you could think of, they gave it an approval. When I was there, they were looking at 150 years of absorption with the amount of housing that they took in. And they were all these, call them zombie developments, where you have all these roads off in nowhere with little cul-de-sacs with like one house on them, and then like all of these miles of road. So the community is on the burden and on the hook for all of this infrastructure. There's not any housing to pay for it. But here's their models. This is producing about let's say $11,000 an acre in value. This is their shopping area with a bank and a hardware store all in the out parcels. This is their main street. So the whole county, I think the whole county is 2,000 people. Their town is probably smaller than yours, yet they've achieved the nosebleed heights of 3 stories and 2 buildings. This is 2 stories. $74,000 of value per acre. Oh, by the way, there's the buffalo on the bar. 90,000 and 55,000. This is housing above a ski shop. And this is their value model. So this is their downtown stuff and what it produces in property taxes per acre, about $90,000 an acre. And then here's the grocery store complex at about $13,000. Just to put it in perspective, and then here's the residential and what they produce in county taxes per acre. So just to show folks, this is how their model operates. This is where the revenue comes from. You need to keep things in balance. You can't have all single-family residential. You can't afford a city with that, nor can you afford a city with a lot of this stuff. So you need to have things balancing it out. Nor should you tell everybody they have to live downtown. That's just not going to happen. But if you just had 5 acres of that guy, it would equal the 12-acre this. Or if you had 2.4 acres of that, it would equal the 12-acre this. So thinking about your land development and what's going to give you a big bang for your buck is something to have a conversation about, and that is related to the design and architecture that's there as well. So we're going to Clear Creek County tomorrow, so they actually haven't even seen this. So you guys get the sneak peek. Here's what's going on in Clear Creek County. You can see the towns. Incidentally, that's the Henderson Mine. That's shutting down. It's really, really scary. That building or that property represents 1/3 of the entire county's property taxes. When that shuts down, I don't think these folks realize how bad it's going to be when that shuts down. But they do have some towns along 70 that are producing some wealth. Incidentally, these little crazy little hairy spike things out here are cabins out in the middle of a federal preserve that somehow have property value. They stick up. That's what they are. But so this is Idaho Springs. And so if you look at this and say, okay, well this is a town that's a little bit further ahead of us as a community. It's got a little bit more of a main street. We can actually see the density of that in downtown Idaho Springs. And that's just, if you go there tomorrow and drive down the street, this is the economic flow of what's there. And so these are all two-story buildings in here producing this kind of spike. This is, by the way, this is housing right here. Across the river from the Starbucks. The Starbucks is like right there, for those of you that know Idaho Springs. So that's a zoom in to the whole thing. So here's their downtown. This is about $4 million of value per acre, 4.5 million, 4.6 million. 0.3 acres of this guy, 0.3 acres of that would equal the 2.7 acre this. That's a 1-story building. we did a more comprehensive study last year in Durango as part of the Downtown Colorado Incorporated annual conference. This is their county in Durango. Now again, this is a bigger place. It's more isolated than what you all are. You kind of feel the influence of the Denver metro area in Boulder a lot more here than what Durango gets. Durango doesn't get any offshoot of anybody else. It's kind of like it's a dot in the middle of nowhere. So this is the total value. So you can see the resorts, super valuable. But when you go to value per acre, it all changes, and here it is in 3D. So it actually makes a really nice little dot right here in the center of the county. And you can see where downtown is. Zooming into the city limits, total value per acre. Again, the downtown pops up. So here's their zooming into the city limits. More than half the county is non-taxable. So the burden of running the place falls on 38% of it. When you get into the city, it's about 50-50. This is one of the larger non-taxable places that we've ever seen. And when I asked the question about that, it turned out they have this very aggressive open space policy where they put a lot of money toward conserving land and taking that land off the tax rolls. So that's great, but you're putting a lot of pressure on that 45% to cover the nut for everything else. And you got to pay for stuff. You got to pay for that bike trail, the sidewalks, and all of that. So their downtown's about 30% non-taxable. This is the most fertile soil, so they do need to keep an eye on that. That's actually not so bad. Asheville's about 44% non-taxable, to put it in perspective. So they're actually okay. But 1% of the county's land area, Durango is producing 35% of the county's property value and about 3/4 of the sales tax generation of the entire county. So for the math nerds in the audience, if you want to do a ratio about size to potency, imagine having one person out of 100 producing 35% of your revenue and 76% of your sales. If you had a shoe shop or something, how would you feel about that person? It's like, this is producing wealth for the community. When you get into the downtown's about 1.6% of the land area, 11% of the city's property value, but it's producing 37% of the city's total revenue in retail taxes. Or another way of looking at it, that at 0.01% of the county's land area, it's producing 28% of the county's retail taxes, which is stunning. That's the downtown. That's not taking into the fact that there's a mall, a Home Depot, a Walmart outside of the city. This is just the downtown part. When you get into the downtown, the historic core is producing about $22,000 of taxable value per acre versus city single family over here. And here's the mall. So city residential is actually more potent than the mall and the Home Depot in property taxes. Were y'all expecting something so nerdy tonight? Is that right? So this is an infill building. This is like a 4-story infill building that happened. It's producing about $65,000 of county taxes per acre. This was kind of interesting. This was highly controversial. They kind of glued some townhouses on top of a 1-story building that was already there. And people complained that there was no parking. But it was like, well, that's fine. Why don't you centralize the parking rather than having them shove it on the site, because they're producing a lot of taxes here compared to other stuff. So just, again, keeping all of this stuff in context and understanding that you're in a shared corporation. It's a communal corporation. It's not a corporation like my business where it's only accountable to me. You know, you guys are all accountable to each other, so how do you make it all work together? So 0.6 acres of that equals a 10-acre this. 0.3 acres of that, basically if you cut this building in half, it would equal the 13-acre Walmart site. 0.4 acres of just doing these little guys would equal the 13-acre Walmart site. Your heritage is critically important. This is the Streeter Hotel that's pulling $12 million of value per acre versus the Durango Mall at $400,000. This has been here for over 100 years. 1.5 acres of that building would equal the 19-acre this. So here's a question for you all. Is this going to be here 100 years from now? No. So where do you want to see more of your value? And again, when I started this conversation, I said our tax system rewards cheap. This is where it comes. This is how it works out. We tend to think of subsidies as you have a community conversation about a subsidy, what you're gonna offer a developer or a homeowner or whatever as a public policy. You have a conversation about it. That is indeed a subsidy. But just how our system is set up, there are subsidies built within it that we don't call it that, but we really should. And this is just pointing that stuff out. So 0.5 acres of this spa, I love the name of that, the spa, 0.5 acres of that little guy would equal the 19-acre this. Retail sales, Colorado, I mean, you all know the drill here. These are all the different states and how they operate. Red is property taxes, green is retail taxes or sales taxes, purple is income taxes. There are a few states out there where you're taxed at an income level to run the local community. So when I say local municipality, I'm saying cities and counties combined. So your county gets the majority of this red bar here, and the city gets a little bit of what's left over, and the city gets the majority of the retail, the county gets a little piece. The blue is transfer. That's stuff that comes from the state back to your community or from the feds back to your community. But generally speaking, this is a super nerdy chart about how everything operates. You generally don't want to be over here hanging out with Louisiana or Alabama, where the majority of the places run off retail taxes. Because as you know, when there's a recession, the first thing that people do is they stop spending. And when they stop spending, your retail slumps. But your property tends not to be more stable. These communities tend to be more stable at a local level in those states. But taking the tax model and going back and readjusting it to fit the retail boundaries that we had, this is the property tax production of Durango. You can see downtown killing it in property taxes. Here's the retail tax model. So here's downtown, retail tax productivity. This is the South Durango Mall, Walmart, all that's down over here in retail taxes. Here's total productivity, jobs. So drilling into downtown and comparing it against South Durango is more retail tax productive in aggregate. It's also more county tax productive, but it's only 1/3 the area is downtown is. So it's almost as tax productive. It's only 1/3 the area. So we said to them, just add 8.3 more acres of that stuff. Just do 8.3 acres of what's already working for you, and you'll actually catch up in total taxes. This is a way to harvest wealth. It's the cash crop. This is a super nerdy chart called an area graph, laying the different districts on top of each other like an onion, and then watching them over time through the recession. And you see the saddle right here. So downtown actually starts out at about 86% of South Durango in total retail tax production. And through the recession, it actually grew to about 91%. So through the recession, downtown is actually starting to catch up with South Durango. So we asked the question, we're like, is it all these infill buildings that they're doing? Are they adding more downtown than South Durango? And this is the difference in square footage that they did in downtown versus South Durango. So even though South Durango was adding, what is that? Like 100 times more than that, the square footage. Downtown, pound for pound, was still catching up. So that Main Street retail is actually super, super, super productive. We did the work with their buy local group as well, and they wanted to drill even deeper. And a couple of businesses, Peter and Tim, they opened their books and they let us look at all of their stuff. And then we compared them against the Walmart. That's one-story retail, one-story retail. Here's the land consumption for these guys versus this guy. This is the county property taxes per acre for this guy versus this guy, these two guys. This is the retail taxes paid per acre from these guys versus these guys. These are the jobs per acre. So that's the data. Let's talk about data. What's producing more for your community? Let's ask another maybe personal question. Which side of this ledger is hiring the local accountant, the local attorney, the local bookkeeper? So who's producing more spin-off wealth for the community? Secondly, who's taking part in running for office or maybe a volunteer on a downtown nonprofit or a trail building? Is it this side of the ledger or is it this side of the ledger? So those are value statements. Start with your data and then ask the value statements on top of it, and this is where you can grow your community. So for you all, we were talking at dinner before this, and it was kind of stunning that your population was more than what you are right now. And I want to feel compelled to say, why don't you guys go back to where you were? Where would you be if you were double your population? Or would that freak you guys out or not? I don't know. You know, but this is how you started. And so you're a place in time that had changes, but where are you going? Is there anything that you can peel from those group of folks that showed up here, where they have a bunch of illiterate miners that built a downtown? Well, they started by building what we knew our towns were. And we've kind of forgotten that in the last 50 years. So they started, how do you grow that, keep going forward? There's lots of lessons that we've done in other places, and I'm just going to throw a smattering of them at you and just kind of burn through this really quickly. In Chattanooga, this is their downtown. They have some development issues going on over here. This developer came in from Atlanta and wanted to build a one-story grocery store called a Publix brand. Publix is like a Safeway for the Southeast. Conventional parking lot box. Here's the site. Around the site, they already have some cool things going on. They've got some mixed-use buildings. They've got an urban grocer over here. It's kind of like a Whole Foods type grocery. And they've got townhouses. So they have the ingredients of urbanism going on here. They have conventional Publix grocery stores. We know what those look like. We can price them. Here's office above retail, residential above retail, just down the street. So we're not grabbing stuff from Boston or Denver. We're just like, this is in your neighborhood. This is that urban grocer right here. So here's the grocery store. They kind of glue on a two-story building with like yoga studios, and I think that's a pet store right there. Publix has done crazy stuff before. This is a Publix that was built in Miami Beach, and it looks like a UFO hit it, but it's really a conveyor belt to get you to your car with 2 layers of parking on top of the grocery store. So they've done some hyper-urban stuff before. They've done a hybrid model in West Palm Beach, Florida, which is pedestrian front and your conventional grocery store parking lot here. So it's a two-faced Publix. So 34 foot of grade change on the site. And one of the things that's kind of upsetting to me is that they were just cleaving into the site and leveling the whole thing. So we made a really awful 3D model. So apologies to any landscape architects in the room. I don't know how to do topo all that well. But this is the model. We wanted to show them that all these houses get to stare at a tarmac of a roof, and here's your quarter-mile long future graffiti wall, because the developer lacks any kind of creative thought on how to work with topography. But that's what you're getting. But the other thing we're doing is we're running the taxes. We're running the city's taxes and the county's taxes. But don't bother paying attention to that. I'm going to come back to it. I just want you to see the design ideas. So we said, okay, let's meet the design guidelines of the urban design standards. And let's just do Urban Design 101. So we have housing facing housing, a couple mixed-use buildings. You still do your grocery store in the center, surface parking lot, everybody's happy, and this is what you get. So at least the housing stares at its partners. And we're able to maximize the density because we've got a bus line that comes up the street, and we have to pay for that infrastructure. If you do a better site design, do what the local guy did, the Green Life model, and move it up against the street, put a crust of a mix of uses around it, work with the topography rather than flatten the site, and this is what you get. Go crazy, do Miami Beach. If you've got 34 foot of grade change, just drive right up on the roof and densify the heck out of it. Just go hog wild, yay. Back it down to West Palm Beach, a smaller footprint hybrid model. And then, let's say you upset the developer, he goes back to Atlanta, and you just get what's already happening in the neighborhood, which is townhouses and mixed-use buildings. So let's run through the taxes. These are the taxes currently paid on the site, and these are the taxes proposed, right? So that's a 3 times gain. So the mayor is saying, we're gonna get 3 times the taxes, and he's right, that's 3 times the taxes. This is if you just did Urban Design 101. These are the taxes you can get on an annual basis under the most basic form of mixed use. This is if you do the Green Life model, what the local guy did. This is if you go crazy, do Miami Beach, back in town to West Palm Beach, in your no-build scenario. So what you have here are all options. And when we do development, as a developer, part of what we're doing is an opportunity cost model. And I'm looking at all of my opportunities to see what happens in my cash flow. But if I'm asking you to do something at a public level, like get rid of those urban design guidelines, y'all need to measure what's on the table for you. So one of the things that we asked the city of Chattanooga, we're like, you need to look at this as an opportunity cost model. All of these are opportunities that you're foregoing because these all meet your standards and that one doesn't. So this is the cost of getting rid of your standards and dropping them down to that. So if we just took 2 of these and did the same look at that, like this is the physical difference between the 2 of them, and this is the value difference of the taxes you're going to be getting different, as well as the county. So part of the other thing that happens is that if I come in and underbuild in your community, that's tantamount to getting a subsidy as well, because I'm paying you less taxes for the infrastructure that you've already committed to the site. So they've already built a street, they've already got sidewalks all around this, and I'm paying a whole lot less taxes here than you. Or another way of looking at it is that when you make a decision, you're with it for 20, 30 years. That's the cash flow that's going to happen. So really, rather than looking at this statically as 1 year, let's net this over 20 years. So over 20 years, this is what the numbers look like. You're going from $300,000 of taxes to $900,000. So you're gaining $600,000 worth of taxes, but you're foregoing millions of dollars of taxes for your community. So really, they could have just thrown $2 million into the deal and just said, okay, we'll just give you $2 million to do this. And you'd still be ahead of the game by $2.2 million of what's being offered to you. So just be aware of that, run the numbers on this stuff, and see what's best for affording your community. That when you don't have money for the basics of like a greenway or an art teacher or a dancing traffic cop, but you guys probably don't have that, it's because it gets tied up in a form of development, of underbuilding. So we were asked in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I'm going to close with this one subject, to do the full net. Could you net out, could we look at a city or a town the same way we look at a business? Can I look at the whole gross, the net expense versus the net revenue? Mayor Joey Durrell for Lafayette, Louisiana, is a business owner. And he said to us, he goes, Joe, people just don't understand the business government. We're going broke. Could you show us? We're going broke, Joe. And I was like, all right, yeah, we'll do it. When we started digging into their numbers, it was kind of fascinating. This is the cover of their county's budget document from 1994. Now, you don't really have to go much further than that to realize what's inside the document. Again, they're Lafayette, Louisiana, they're funny people. So this is the government about to get hit by a tsunami and a shark going to eat it. So what do you think the county officials did when faced with this terrible news? Kicked the can down the road. The very next year, undeterred, she put this on the budget document. Like, hey, did I mention how screwed we are? So the third year, they did a joint city-county government to bail the city residents bailed the county out, basically, because they're county residents as well. So they did a joint form of government. And so we asked them, we said, okay, in the 20 years since you did this in 1996, what have you done to change your behavior? Because you just got back to the same situation. You just basically took the largesse of the city and liquidated it into the county. What have you changed your behavior? Or did you just fire the artist from the first 2 years and you went to Microsoft Clip Art? Like, what did you do? So here's their tax productivity model. Here's downtown. This is some new urbanism stuff here. But generally, they spread out southwest and south and southwest. Just taking the pavement that they own. They own roads. You all own roads. In their case, they have to rebuild their roads every 45 years, 40 years. They're built on a rubbery soil. It's an old swamp, basically, so the roads actually shake apart. But taking the roads as a system and saying, okay, it's just all asphalt. If we just shoved it together, how much asphalt do you own? They own enough asphalt to span from Long Island to Manhattan to New Jersey, 6.5 square miles, if you were to call it a parking lot. Like, you bought it, that's yours. So, or it's about 12 times the size of the French Quarter. That's a lot of asphalt. So 13% of it were in these things. We call them publicly funded and maintained driveways. People that didn't want to have traffic going through their communities, they just cut the road off. And they're all happy. They don't have traffic. And it's like, well, that's wonderful. Now the traffic has to go somewhere else, so somebody else has to live with double the volume because you cut off this. This is a driveway, as far as we're concerned. That person even treats it like a driveway. Why is the public paying to resurface that? 13% of that land area of the 6.5 square miles. That's a lot of system. You know, it's like people are happy this way, right? Well, yeah, I'd be happy if I was 6 foot tall and had a full head of hair. I think you should make me happy. Is that what this is about? So the old city limits have a whole lot more roads than out in the county. Yet when you look at how they're funded, people out here are paying so much less than what they own. So I made a really stupid recommendation that the two pie charts should match. Seems reasonable, right? One of the elected officials responded to me by saying this: "It's not where you live; it's what you believe." Which is all right. Yeah. I guess this has turned into, we've gone from facts to fantasy. The Public Works Director responded by saying this: "There's no such thing as an infrastructure fairy." So we had to Photoshop Kevin in on that one. And Kevin's like, "These people just don't get it. Could you just explain it to them?" We're like, "All right, we'll do a cash flow model." So in 1960, a developer built a subdivision or something with some roads in it. When I build a subdivision with roads in it, what I'm doing is I'm dividing up the roads into all the houses that are on it, and I'm putting a little piece of that in all the bills and mortgages that you guys are going to take down to pay for that cost of road that I had to build. Because I just magically can't pull it out of my pocket. I got to get the money from somewhere. But then I turn around and donate it to the city or to the county, and they get my road. They take on the liability. So when we do a rehab on one of our buildings and we put an air conditioner on the roof for all of those units, we set up a bank account for that air conditioner's replacement 20 or 30 years from now when we have to rebuild that, because it's going to be expensive. So we make a little savings account for the replacement reserve. So the city should be doing the same thing. We told them, we said, you should have set aside that much money in 1960 because this is the cost of replacement of that road in 2010. So that's what should be set aside. But the problem is in 1961, we took on another road, and then another road, and another road. It just kept on going. So we're not letting you build another road from here to infinity, and this is how you're going to cash flow. So let me ask you a really simple question. Blue is your revenue, red is your obligated debt burden. Do you have enough blue to pay for the red? Let me make it easier for you. Do you have enough blue to pay for the red? So in addition to the red being 18 times the size, half that debt service that you're already getting, or the revenue you're getting, is already committed to the debt service on the bonds of the red stuff. That's money you don't even see. It just goes straight to New York City or wherever your bonding agency is, and they just skim it off the top. So they're seriously screwed, pardon the term. So this is their model with all the revenue sticking up in green. It's like looking at the side of the earth, basically, and seeing all the sunk costs of all their infrastructure. So when in any business you net your revenues against your expenses, this is what it looks like, what's in the black and what's in the red. Here's the whole thing in 3D. So if we just took this whole thing and dropped it on the floor, this is what it looks like. This is what steps up. So we can see the true cost of all of this stuff versus the net revenue production out here. And they told us, they said, look, Joe, people want to live out here. I'm like, well, that's great. This is what you're paying them to move out there, because they're not paying that full cost of infrastructure. So you can't afford the other things because they're sucking it all away from you. Just do more of this stuff until you can get yourself fiscally healthy. So to put real simply, in 1949 they had 35,000 people. They had 5 feet of pipe per person, 2.4 fire hydrants. They've grown their population to 121,000 people. They've grown their infrastructure, feet of pipe per person, to 50 feet of pipe per person, and 51 fire hydrants per 1,000. Their population has increased 350%. Their liabilities increased 1,000 and 2,000%. They told me the whole entire time they got rich. They got oil money out of the Gulf. They're rich. It's like, all right, let's see how rich you are. Adjusted for today's dollars, this is where you started, and here's where you're at. So you actually did get wealthier by 160%. You got 160% wealthier, you got thousands of percent in the hole. This is like me getting a $5,000 a year raise and convincing my wife into building a 60,000 square foot addition on my house. It'd feel great to have that 60,000 square feet. That'd be awesome. I can't afford it. So they have a really, really simple problem. This isn't just them. Most American cities that went through this development pattern without a whole lot of urban balance essentially have bought into that system. It just takes 40, 50 years to catch up to you. So this is the deal. Their average house is paying about $1,500 in taxes per house. Of that, what actually matriculates to the roads is about 150 bucks. They've got to pay for police officers, fire department, people, all that other stuff, right? Parks. The roads, however, if you looked at the savings account that the road should have per year, it's this. Now there's stuff under the roads. It's called pipes. Those have to be replaced. That reserve account is this. So the average house is not paying $7,000 a house. That's how it pencils out. Is that depressing? It's just how we think that we think cities operate. And then there's the reality. And it's never really all that fun to be in this section of the room, because you all get to see the budgets and you get to see the reality of what you have to pay for. So just realize there's behavior at play and how the system operates. There's some crazy, crazy stuff out there. We turn the buildings off. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming, by the way. There are no buildings in this image. This is just the dirt value per acre. And so we have low value to high value, and you expect the world to look like this. Everybody in this neighborhood has the same dirt value per acre in the neighborhood. But when we were presenting this in Cheyenne, I was like, hey, what's going on over here? Where this is $15,000 an acre, and just by crossing the street, it jumps up to $35,000. How by crossing the street in the same zoning category does land double in value? And just to the folks in the room that raised their hands about the tax assessment policy, do y'all know why this happens? So I was presenting this at like 8 in the morning, and the tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she shot her hand up in the air. And she goes, "You don't understand." And I was like, "Try me, what am I missing?" She goes, "Well, they have a bigger parcel of land, and the more land you have, the lower the value per acre." The mayor just about spat coffee out of his nose. He was laughing so hard. I'm like, really? So I've got 3/4 of a mile of a street, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile street, half a mile. I've got 3 miles of infrastructure around the property. This fellow's got 200 feet of frontage. She goes, "Yeah, we don't count infrastructure. That's not part of the assessment." And I'm like, okay. I've got a bigger parcel of land. I can probably put more stuff on it. More stuff means more trips. More trips mean more car accidents, more fire calls, police calls. She goes, "Yeah, we don't count any of that either. It's our standard. The more land you have, the lower the value per acre." Does that make any sense to anybody? So I went to the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers conference, which is probably the squarest conference I've ever done. It makes the planning conference look like Burning Man by comparison. But I asked them, I said, "Where'd this standard come from? Did Moses deliver it to you? Like, where'd this come from?" And their magazine is called Fair and Equitable, and I asked them how it's fair or equitable. They're like, "It's not." I'm like, "Can you change that?" They're like, "We probably should." This is how your tax system operates, folks. So realize these aren't invisible market forces. These are things that you can control, or you can put in new policies to kind of deal with the damage that's being created by things created at the state. You have that ability here. You have the tools. Tax systems will tell you everything about what's going on. This is, in Normandy, you were taxed on your building footprint, so people started stepping out over the street to avoid taxes. In England, you were taxed progressively when you had windows. The more windows you had, the higher